स्टेरीज ऑन लाइफ्स वे के नेक्स्ट सेक्शन का नाम है गिल्टी स्लैश नॉट गिल्टी, अ स्टोरी ऑफ सफरिंग एंड इमेजिनरी साइकोलॉजिकल कंस्ट्रक्शन। ये सेक्शन एक यंग मैन के बारे में है हु वाज इन लव, लेकिन उसने अपनी इंगेजमेंट ब्रेक ऑफ कर दी, जिस तरह कीर्केगार्ड ने अपनी इंगेजमेंट ब्रेक ऑफ कर दी विद रेजीन ऑल्सन। दिस सेक्शन इन सम वेज इज़ रेमिनिसेंट ऑफ द डायरी ऑफ अ सेड्यूसर, जो एक सेक्शन था इन आइदर और अनदर बुक बाय कीर्केगार्ड, बट इट एग्जिबिट्स क्वाइट अ डिफरेंट एस्थेटिक। ये सेक्शन जो है इट इज़ अबाउट passionate commitment to the beloved in the ethical, expressed in erotic love, and commitment to God in the religious stage. Kierkegaard कहता है किताब में, I cannot keep my soul in the immediacy of falling in love. I am well aware that she is lovely, in my eyes, indescribably so, but I do not feel like throwing the passion of my soul in that direction. Alas, loveliness is ephemeral, it is a shame to grasp it at once, so I have chosen the religious. This is closest to me. My faith is in it. This collision between sagacity and purely ethical religious obligations, abstractly understood, is difficult enough. Enclosing reserve, silence, that is, the teleological suspension of the duty to speak the truth, is strictly formal qualification and therefore can just as well be the form for good as for evil. ये टेलीलॉजिकल सस्पेंशन जो यहाँ पर टर्म कीर्केगार्ड यूज़ कर रहा है, वो उसने फियर एंड ट्रेम्बलिंग के अंदर यूज़ की थी। उस सस्पेंशन को या उस सेटिंग असाइड को, उस टेम्पररी सस्पेंशन को रेफ़र करने के लिए जो अब्राहम ने की थी व्हेन ही वाज कमांडेड टू सैक्रिफाइस हिज सन बाय गॉड। क्विडम के लिए, क्विडम एक कैरेक्टर है इस सेक्शन के अंदर, उसके लिए सच बोलना विच इज़ द एथिकली राइट थिंग टू डू, इट मस्ट बी सस्पेंडेड फॉर अ हायर पर्पस। सो अटरिंग द ट्रुथ की भी एक टेलीलॉजिकल सस्पेंशन पेश की गई है इस सेक्शन के अंदर। एंड कीर्केगार्ड सेज दिस इन दीज वर्ड्स, देयर इज़ नो टाइम एट ऑल टू थिंक अबाउट माई सेल्फ एंड येट माई इनर लाइफ इज सच दैट इट कैन प्रोवाइड इनफ टू थिंक अबाउट। आई एम रियली नो रिलीजियस इंडिविजुअलिटी, आई एम जस्ट अ रेगुलर एंड perfectly constructed possibility of such a person. With the sword hanging over my head, in peril of my life, I discovered the religious crisis with a primitivity such as if I had not known of them before, with such a primitivity that if they had not been discovered, I would have to discover them. As possibility, I am all right, but when at the turning point I want to appreciate the religious prototypes, I encounter a philosophical doubt that I would not express as such to one single person. What it depends upon is the element of appropriation. Predisposed as I am, at the turning point of the religious crisis, I reach for the paradigm. But look, I cannot understand the paradigm at all, even though I venerate it with a childlike piety that does not want to abandon it. As soon as I disdain duty, God becomes exclusive. For only in duty am I in humble harmony with His sublimity, and therefore His majesty is not exclusiveness. Therefore, it is not God who makes Himself exclusive, which He never does. This is paganism. But it is I who make Him exclusive, and this is punishment. इस सेक्शन में एक लेटर इंक्लूडेड है फ्रॉम फ्रेटर टैकिटर्नस, जो हमें इन्फॉर्म करता है कि ये डायरी जो है, ये जो हम सेक्शन रीड कर रहे हैं, इट इज़ एन इमेजिनरी कंस्ट्रक्शन, और फिर वो उसका आगे जाके पर्पस एक्सप्लेन करेगा। वो एक डिस्क्रिप्शन देता है एग्जिस्टेंस फेयर्स की, और वो बार बार एक मैन और एक वुमेन को रेफ़र करता है, रेफर्ड रिस्पेक्टिवली एज क्विडम एंड केडम, जो जिनका मतलब लैटिन के अंदर है समवन, इन बोथ मैस्कुलिन एंड फेमिनिन फॉर्म्स। वो लिखता है, नाउ टू माई इमेजिनरी कंस्ट्रक्शन आई हैव प्लेस्ड टुगेदर टू हेट्रोजेनस इंडिविजुअलिटीज, वन मेल एंड वन फीमेल. Him I have kept in the power of spirit in the direction of the religious, and her I have kept in aesthetic categories. As soon as I posit a point of unity, there can be plenty of misunderstanding. The misunderstanding then is not due to some third factor, as if they understood each other and were separated by some alien power. No, ironically enough, everything favors their misunderstanding. There is nothing to keep them from having each other and talking together, but right there the misunderstanding begins. He poetizes her now, but by virtue of a religious ideality that comes after actuality. Just as a lover, by virtue of an ideality that comes prior to actuality, sees beauties in the beloved that are not there, so he, with the purposeful passion of repentance, sees terrors that do not exist. Here, at one time and the same time, are the good and exceptional in him, but also the demonic. that he cannot find rest and come to rest in the ultimate religious resolution, but is constantly kept in a state of suspension. ये state of suspension एक unwillingness है to commit oneself to something or someone. Kierkegaard की यही main criticism है of the people of his time कि they lacked the willingness, they lacked the ability basically to exercise passion in their commitment. वो रिफ्लेक्शन को प्रेफर करते थे, वो मेयर इंटेलेक्चुअल या सूडो इंटेलेक्चुअल इन्वॉल्वमेंट को प्रेफर करते थे, विच इज़ अल्टीमेटली ही सेज सेल्फ रेफरेंशियल सिंस इट रिफ्यूजेस टू एंगेज होल हार्टेडली विद द ऑब्जेक्ट ऑफ इंक्वायरी, स्पेशली विद गॉड. टैकिटर्नस हमें बताता है कि क्विडम seeks to express the religious but in aesthetic terms and is therefore incapable of attaining the erotic or the religious. He himself is suspended. Quidam अपनी journal entries के अंदर he sometimes starts with the words a year ago today and such. Thus his entries are recollections, और recollection एक distinct feature है of the aesthetic stage. It is a backwards looking action, जबकि commitment to the beloved एक example of forward looking repetition, the ethical. Kierkegaard is concerned with the forward looking passionate commitment to the ideal who is God. This is the religious stage. He writes, from the heading of this section the reader will easily perceive that it is not my intention to remain in the aesthetic, but that I want to go on to the religious. What the tragic hero is in the aesthetic, the religious prototype, is for the religious consciousness. The poet here is speaker. Here one turns again to the historical. The prototype is presented and then the speaker declares that it is positively certain, for it is historical, and the believing congregation believes everything, even that the speaker knows what he is himself saying. In order to grasp the ideality, I must be able to dissolve the historical in the ideality, or do what God is said to do for one who is dying. Shine upon it. फिर इस सेक्शन में Kierkegaard returns to a theme जो उसने the philosophical fragments और concluding unscientific postscript के अंदर भी काफ़ी डिटेल में मेंशन किया है, which is the incorrectness of grounding the religious in the historical. वो कहता है कि जो historical it does not save, it does not, you do not prove the resurrection, for example, by referring to history. It cannot be done. The object of religion, God, must be approached subjectively. ये इस सेक्शन का जो कैरेक्टर है क्विडम, ही इज़ नॉट येट इन द रिलीजियस. वो पैशनेट है और वो अच्छी बात है, बट ही इज़ नॉट पैशनेट येट फॉर द रिलीजियस. वो रिलीजन को एज अ ट्रेजिक पोइट अप्रोच करता है, नॉट एज अ पैशनेट बिलीवर. हिज सफरिंग्स आर इन द एस्थेटिक डिस्पाइट हिज रिलीजियस इंक्लिनेशंस. सीरीज ऑन लाइफ स्वे का हर एक सेक्शन रिप्रेजेंट करता है वन ऑफ द स्टेजेस, और जो थर्ड पार्ट है इट इज़ बाय फार द लॉन्गेस्ट ऑफ द थ्री, which of itself emphasizes the importance of the religious stage. Kierkegaard इन stages को existence spheres बोलता है इन लफ्ज़ों में. There are three existence spheres: the aesthetic, the ethical, and the religious. The metaphysical is abstraction, and there is no human who exists metaphysically. The metaphysical, the ontological, is, but it does not exist. For when it exists, it does so in the aesthetic, in the ethical, in the religious, and when it is the abstraction from a prior thing to the aesthetic, the ethical, the religious. The ethical sphere is only a transition sphere, and therefore its highest expression is repentance as a negative action. The aesthetic sphere is the sphere of immediacy, the ethical the sphere of requirement, and the religious the sphere of fulfillment. But please note, not a fulfillment such as when one fills an alms box or a sack of gold, for repentance has specifically created a boundless space, and as a consequence the religious contradiction, which one nevertheless does not pass through once and for all. Just as repentance is its expression, so repentance is the most dialectical. Kierkegaard कहता है the metaphysical is abstraction and there is no human who exists metaphysically. Kierkegaard कहता है कि in एग्जिस्टेंस स्फेयर्स के बाहर कोई रियल एग्जिस्टेंस नहीं है फॉर अ पर्सन टू ड्वेल इन. इस तरह वो कहता है कि द मेटाफिजिकल इज़ बट डज नॉट एग्जिस्ट. इट इज़ मेयर एब्स्ट्रैक्शन एंड देयर इज़ नो ह्यूमन हु एग्जिस्ट्स मेटाफिजिकली. जो एस्थेटिक स्फेयर है इट कैन नॉट ब्रिंग अबाउट फुलफिलमेंट बिकॉज इट इज़ कंसर्न्ड विद द इमीडिएट. That is, it is not a telos, nor does it lead to one. The ethical sphere, on the other hand, वो एक transition है. वो एक जगह lead तो करता है, लेकिन its demands are impossible to fulfill. Or the religious sphere is the fulfillment, but difficult fulfillment, to rest joyful in the paradox. Series on lives वे एक काफ़ी difficult काम है to understand, especially in the first reading. That is why I've quoted many passages from the book, and even if I wanted to, I could not summarize everything that Kierkegaard has written in the book. So I would suggest that you read Series on Life's Way, especially along with Fear and Trembling, along with either or, if you do not have much time to read all of Kierkegaard's works.